The world is facing greater conflict than ever before. From Nagorno-Karabakh to South Sudan to Afghanistan, we continue to witness renewed violence as a result of the repeated failure of peace processes. Last year alone, we witnessed 52 ongoing conflicts. Many peace processes remain stalled, and on average, post-conflict peace lasts only 7 years. What are we doing wrong? And what should we do differently? Is it time to break these trends? Is it time to make the peace-building system fit for the 21st century? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our audience in various parts of the world. I'm Hiba Qasas, and I'm the head of the Principles for Peace initiative here at Interpeace. And I welcome you to the launch event of the Principles for Peace initiative and the International Commission on Inclusive Peace. The Principles for Peace initiative is a collective, participatory, and global effort to rethink and reshape how peace processes are structured and realized, moving towards more sustainable and inclusive peace. Today, we will announce the International Commission on Inclusive Peace. The Independent Commission will kickstart a global participatory process to reframe thinking on global peace agenda and develop a set of principles that provide a frame of reference for peace. We have the Geneva Convention to guide conducts of states in war. We have the humanitarian principles to guide humanitarian actors. It is time to have principles for peace that provide us with a common compass. An integral part of this initiative and key to the work of the International Commission is the amplification of the voices of those whose destiny and lives are shaped by conflict. Its work will be grounded in evidence, experience, and broad participation. You're going to hear a lot of information today. Many interventions from senior government representatives, supporters, and commissioners on the imperative for action, on how we can tackle this challenge together as a collective effort, not as single institutions, not as single organizations or government representatives or activists. We hope that at the end of the dialogue, you feel inspired. We hope that you will feel like you want to get involved with the various partners of this initiative and contribute your part to realize lasting peace. Let's watch a short video to learn more about this initiative.
Our peace processes are failing because we are bringing people who only understand the language of violence and coercion.
But I realize very much that the way we have been involved, and I've been involved in peacemaking, is not sufficient. We have to do things differently. We have to ensure that, as I say, the top-down, every country is the same. Let's just put a toolbox on a country and then hope for the best is a wrong one.
Women are, to a very limited extent, represented in peace negotiations, and that is an obvious problem.
Interestingly enough, it's not like there have not been reports and studies about these shortcomings. There are tons of them, but for some reason we keep on repeating the same mistakes over and over again.
The tardiness of the political elites of the world, from a multilateral institution, even like the UN, to wish to engage in any conflict that doesn't have a direct impact on their self-interest.
Time is ripe. We see that there is more conflict. We see that conflict are starting and then restarting again. We see that revenge, hatred is everywhere.
One thing that we really need to understand and remind ourselves, and it should really be part of what we internalize, is that peace takes time.
I'm in my 30s and I haven't seen a single day of peace in Afghanistan. And I often thought, what is needed to be done? What can I do to bring a little bit of stability in this country, and at least share my part in bringing people closer together?
This is an initiative that has the potential to speak truth. It has an initiative that has the potential to be radical and energetic.
What excites me most is the honesty of such an initiative. It takes some bit of courage to say, hey, no, we seem to be on the wrong path. We need to step back and rethink this.
This is your commission, this is your initiative as well as mine.
After this short introduction to the initiative, I would like to turn to our first guest speaker, Scott Weber, the president of Interpeace. Scott, we heard a number of commissioners speak about some of the challenges to our current approach to peace. Can you tell us about the imperative to rethink peace processes? What are some of the fundamental flaws in our current approach?
Thank you, Hiba. Yes, we've heard some of the points from the commissioners. Let me add a few here. The first is that we know that peace is not just the absence of violence, and yet most peace processes are still primarily focused on ending the hostilities and not sufficiently on building trust in society and ensuring that the solutions to the conflict, but also the state institutions, have broad legitimacy. The second is that most peace processes remain exclusive affairs of a narrow elite and tend to be externally driven processes as well. They exclude the majority of society, the women and youth, but also, and crucially, the voices of the survivors of the violence. And if we hope for justice to underpin a lasting peace, their voices must not just be heard, but must influence the solutions. Then we have confused over the years a peace process with a negotiating table. We need to widen our gaze and understand that we need to give equal importance to the processes in communities and across these countries from the bottom up that are laying the foundation for sustainable peace. And we need to recognize that the negotiating table also has a tendency to reward the guys with the guns, and that the greater your ability to commit violence, the greater your seat at the table, and that shouldn't be the case. Then, when we do reach a peace agreement, we tend not to implement them. In 35% of the cases, we don't implement them at all. And of the remaining 65%, about half of those are left to die a slow death of neglect, because those who come into power after a conflict tend not to have signed it and don't feel a sense of accountability to what was agreed. And because they are exclusive, the people haven't been involved and can't hold their leaders sufficiently accountable for what was agreed. Then, as peacemakers and as an international community, we need to look at ourselves in the mirror too. We need to recognize that for far too long, we've been importing one solution a solution from one country onto another, and not recognizing that context is everything, that the solutions need to be rooted in the soil of each society for them to be legitimate. And we need to recognize as well that, like a tree, peace grows from the ground up, and it also has roots, which means we have to go deeper into the history of these conflicts. We need to recognize what led in the past to the current grievances and the senses of exclusion that are giving birth to violence today. And lastly, we need to look at who benefits from the conflict, who is making money off instability, and ensure that that analysis and that lens is brought to the table as well, but also that those who have a chance to benefit from the peace are brought into the process. So these are just a few reasons, Hiba, why when you take together with the poor track record of peace processes, the sobering statistics on that, it has created a sense of urgency and of importance for us to do something about this now. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. I would like to also move to our next speaker, who's with us live today, the State Secretary Per Olsson Frid of the Ministry of International Development Cooperation in Sweden. Sweden has been a supporter of the Principles for Peace initiative from its idea phase. We also know that Sweden is a great supporter of the peace and security agenda. A lot of the problems that we've heard about from the commissioners and from Scott have been long known. They're not new. We've known this as an international community, as policy and practitioners. Why now? Is there an opportunity to change the status quo?
Well, thank you, Hiba, and good day to you and to Scott. It's great to be with you today for this important launch. Yes, I mean, global displacement has now reached almost 80 million people, which is almost double the number of displaced people just a decade ago. And this is mostly due to the recurrence of conflict, just as Scott was mentioning, which has become more common than the offset of new conflict. So the launch of this initiative, yes, it couldn't be more timely. And adding to this, the COVID-19 pandemic, not only is it a devastating health crisis with unprecedented humanitarian and socioeconomic consequences, but it's also risks aggravating existing conflicts and creating new ones. So sustainable peace efforts must be now also an integral part of our global response to the pandemic. And I think this launch with these principles and this work comes very handy and timely in relation to this as well. I think this initiative is very well aligned with the Swedish commitments to conflict prevention and peace building at large, not least to make the women, peace and security agenda commitments a reality on the ground. Yes, 20 years ago, we adopted the resolution 1325, but still 7 out of 10 peace processes still exclude women. And inclusive peace processes are, of course, key to ensure more sustainable outcomes. And I think Scott just outlined that very well. There is an increased understanding that peace processes in its current formats have not been able to stop violence and end suffering or build peace the way we want them to work. So we need to engage in processes to rethink and reshape how peace processes are structured, sequenced, and implemented. The work doesn't end when there is a ceasefire. Peace building starts before ceasefire, but must continue. And that is what we now need to learn, and that is what we need to start working with. There's a momentum in the multilateral processes, I think, to push towards more inclusive peace processes in which all parts of society can participate and have a say on their future. This year's commemoration of the Women, Peace and Security and Youth Peace and Security agendas, the ongoing review of UN peace building, together with the implementation of the UN 75 declaration and building back better and greener, more equal, inclusive and sustainable after this pandemic, are important opportunities that we now need to build upon. And I see this launch and I see this work that we're now doing together as an integral part of all of those processes, building a momentum for a new multilateral order, for a new order for global cooperation to build societies more inclusive, more equal, more gender equal, more sustainable. And therefore, of course, in this world of procrastinated conflicts and an unprecedented humanitarian situation, peace must be at the heart of our global efforts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State Secretary, and it's great to hear about the various opportunities and linkages that a number of member states that support this initiative will facilitate for the initiative. The International Commission on Inclusive Peace brings together an impressive and diverse group of committed leaders with a wealth of experience in politics, in mediation, in civilian peace building, in peacemaking, in humanitarian, development, and stabilization field. Some served in government or international organizations. Some are local actors, champions, and experts in the area of inclusion, women and youth, peace and security. They bring a diversity of perspectives. I asked 3 of our international commissioners about their personal experience with some of the flaws that we've heard about already in our current system and what they have seen on the ground from their personal experiences. Let's hear what they had to say.
Usually in the peace process, and when you talk about peace on the table, the 3 categories that are really, I think, are not present at the table. First of all, role of victims. Victims need to be present on the table when a peace settlement or a peace process, or I would say an end to violence, is negotiated. Second, minorities. Women, ethnic, national, and all age category minorities need to be part of the peace process. Third, those whose future is at stake. And let's suppose in Afghanistan, the youth population. Whatever structure we are talking about for a future country, let's say any country, I think it's the people whose future would be at stake when such processes are being talked about. So they really need to be present on the table, and at least if not on the table, they have to be given voice in the process.
Those were the words of Nahid Sarabi from Afghanistan, who was heavily involved in peace processes through her role as deputy for the Secretariat for Peace Loya Jirga in 2019. When we discussed, we talked about the ongoing peace processes in Afghanistan and some of the shortcomings of the model of the negotiations on the table. I also asked Bert Koenders, the former special representative of the UN Secretary General and head of the UN operations in Ivory Coast and Mali, and former foreign minister of the Netherlands, about his frustrations with the way peace processes are conceived and structured today. Let's hear him out.
The Secretary General had told me, please set up a mission there and make sure that people are protected, that we start a peace process, that we involve the local people, and that in the horrific situation that was apparent in Mali in 2013, that we really could make a difference. And then you come into the country, what is the surprise? The surprise is, first of all, that yes, there is a resolution fixed in New York. Everybody in the end agreed in the Security Council. And you come basically in a country without any means, setting up a new mission with 90 nationalities, with not sufficient political, human rights, mediation, or for that matter, important military means. And I was maybe not surprised, but struck by the fact that if people want to have hope of a mission in a country in distress where so many people were suffering, that actually one starts from scratch every time, as if we have no lessons learned, as if we don't know that a mission can only be credible if you immediately from day one on, you can act, you can move your people, you can go to villages where people have to be protected, you can start with the contacts in the local population to make peace. In fact, that's not the case, and therefore you see what happens mostly is a standard approach into each country at the moment that there is still nothing, and the expectations are very, very high of the population. That is not a way of doing that can be sustainable in the longer future. So that was one surprise, and there are many more. A very important lesson for all of us, I think, was that if you do and help peace processes and you work with local people ensure that everybody is involved, not just the people that have been picked up the arms, put them around a table, sit them together for as long as possible to get some compromise, and then think afterwards that somehow these people are the future leaders of the world. I'm simplifying a little bit because, in fact, it was more complex. You have to stop a war, but stopping a war is not the same as bringing peace. And there you require the women, the youth, the people in Gao, which is a town in middle Mali, where so many young people were both against the government and against the rebellion and against the jihadists. They had moved into their own ways of administering that town. And I felt very much that these people should be part of the solution. And quickly they were seen as part of the problem. So this issue of inclusivity is absolutely key.
Also, to discuss some of the shortcomings in our approach, I spoke with the former force commander of the United Nations Assistant Mission in Rwanda, Lieutenant General Romeo Dallaire, who witnessed the international community when it failed to prevent a genocide. Since then, Lieutenant General Dallaire has been very vocal and critical about the role of the international community. Let's hear from him about our collective responsibility and where we are getting this wrong.
There are a number of factors that come into play, of course, but some of the dominant ones are, I think, the following. One is the tardiness of the political elites of the world, from a multilateral institution, even like the UN, to wish to engage in any conflict that doesn't have a direct impact on their self-interest. Second, if there are any risks of casualties that might result from our attempting to bring solutions to the field in the way of looking at trying to solve this, that too will create an absolute abhorrence on many, many countries, many fronts, of even wanting to engage into the process. The third side of this is the fact that there is so much political risk in, I consider, still a very, very immature era of the post-Cold War that we're in, of accepting the fact that if you do intervene and you do prevent something, that you are not going to be held accountable for having wasted resources or that there was an overreaction on your part. The ability of the political elites to become statesmen, to be able to assess in a very, very, very humble way the scenarios that are being played out, and that they are willing to take risks with their nations to help other elements of humanity. That is the flaw that will prevent even great concepts like responsibility to protect to be able never to be operationalized.
Those were sobering reflections from two leaders, from two international commissioners who have led political missions, stabilization missions, and served as force commanders. I believe what they've shared with us is an important opportunity for us to reflect. Can we, in good conscience, continue to apply the same solutions expecting different results? I don't think so. This is at the heart of our approach in this initiative, is to rethink, to reflect, but to try and move forward in a different direction, in a positive direction, building on these lessons learned. It is always, of course, easier to speak of what's broken than identify solutions or opportunities. I discussed this with the International Commission, Teresita Delis, who was party to the Philippines peace agreement on the Bangsamoro. I asked her about some of the key factors that can ensure that peace can succeed.
Peace processes have to be owned locally, and one has to find a way to do that. We know that in order to keep the peace talk safe, sometimes you have to bring it to to some place far away, but you have to find a way to make sure that the local people identify with that and see that in every step that is made on the table, it means something for them. Otherwise it is a document that may be signed even by the highest officials of the planet, but will not be something that the local people themselves will claim and say, yes, that matters to me, and I will do everything to make sure that that agreement will hold.
Mr. Rory Stewart, the former Minister of State in the Foreign Office and former Secretary of State for International Development in the UK, shared with me insights from his experience in government. Let's hear what he said.
In the end, much, if not most, of the anxieties we have around poverty, global poverty, international development, going forward are going to be in conflict-affected states. And most of the efforts that we're going to make with international development over the next 30 or 40 years are going to be in conflict-affected states. Understanding the drivers of that conflict, understanding how important politics is to that conflict, and coming up with reasonable ways of addressing it in a way that actually lasts, that doesn't collapse immediately, that actually allows development to happen, that connects peace to all those other things that we care about, whether in health, or education, or human rights, or democracy, is good for those societies, is good for us, and is absolutely central to our obligations as international governments, as donors, and indeed as human beings.
Those were the words of our International Commissioners on Inclusive Peace. I think they can share with us a lot of lessons for the 2 years to come. One of the key strategies of the initiative is to engage governments and seek to anchor the principles in relevant strategic global processes and national efforts, to lay the foundations for global adoption and long-term impact. The initiative enjoys the backing of an increasing number of countries which are providing political and financial support to the initiative. We will hear some messages from key representatives of states that are supporting the initiative politically and financially. Denmark has been a committed and reliable partner to many organizations and innovative efforts in the peace, humanitarian, and peace space. Let's turn to Mr. Steven Schonman, the Deputy State Secretary for Development Cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. He spoke to us about the imperative to act and why they are supporting this important initiative.
Peace processes have repeatedly failed the very people that they are meant to protect. Close to half of all conflicts have recurred over the last decades. Today, large populations are living in a state of protracted crisis marked by cycles of recurring violence and fighting. Denmark is committed to help change these gloomy facts for a better tomorrow. As such, we are in full support of Interpeace's innovative initiative. The opportunity and momentum to turn these negative trends around and reframe approaches to peace processes is here now. And importantly, the political will is here. This is reflected in policy frameworks such as the Sustaining Peace and the Women, Peace and Security agendas. We must build on this momentum through a collective effort to establish principles for peace, principles which can serve as a new frame of reference, a moral and ethical basis for peace processes, and a set of standards that guide their implementation. A set of principles for peace that are truly inclusive, especially in terms of providing women with full and meaningful participation. Some of the strength of the Principles for Peace initiative is also the independence of the Commission, its diversity, and mandate to act as a listening body, creating a bridge between the international and the local level. These features distinguish the initiative from prior efforts and set a new standard for rethinking the current approaches. Denmark believes that this can lead to a more sustainable peace agreement for the benefit of us all. This is why Denmark fully supports the Principle for Peace initiative. The aim is to anchor the principles in the international system and lay the foundation for long-term commitments towards more sustainable, lasting, and inclusive peace processes.
These were the words of the Deputy State Secretary for Development Cooperation from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. And now we turn to Switzerland. Switzerland has a long history of mediation and peace building, and their backing to peace efforts has been a long tradition. Let us hear from Ms. Christina Marti, State Secretary and Head of Directorate for Political Affairs from the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. She spoke to us about why they are supporting the initiative and what they hope it will achieve.
Dear Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to participate in this launch event, even though it must take place virtually. The world today is faced with an unprecedented number of violent conflicts. In 2019, the world reached, for the second time since 1946, the highest number of interstate conflicts. At the same time, conflicts are becoming more fragmented. While many reasons can explain the rising number of violent conflicts, we may as well ask ourselves if we, as a global community, have perhaps under-delivered at designing effective peace-building mechanisms. Although the nature of conflict has changed, the approach and normative framework of how to deal with conflicts has, in fact, not changed much in the last 50 years. So, although we are facing an era of increased conflicts, existing models for peace processes fail to be effective when they are most needed. The Principles for Peace initiative will look at innovative ways of tackling contemporary conflicts. Our support to this initiative is based on Switzerland's long tradition of supporting peace processes and facilitating negotiations. It aligns with Switzerland's commitment to multilateralism and its dedication to strengthening the international peace and security architecture. This commitment has been renewed and strengthened in Switzerland's new foreign policy strategy, which was adopted this year. In recent years, Switzerland has supported 17 peace processes and facilitated ceasefire negotiations in 6 countries. We support the Principles for Peace initiative because we want to make sure that whenever we assist a peace process, it has the highest possible chances of succeeding in achieving lasting peace. We welcome the establishment of the International Commission, which brings together an impressive and diverse group of committed individuals who will lead a global participatory process. We also look forward to the initiative engaging a broad range of actors by building alliances with global, regional, and local peace organizations to ensure a truly collective effort with a real impact. As a diverse nation, Switzerland has learned the art of dialogue and broader engagement to contribute to solutions. Interpeace and its partners will be guided by this people-centered and inclusive approach, which is also at the heart of the Swiss Constitution and foreign policy. Ultimately, the aim of this initiative is not just to achieve a list of theoretical principles, but rather concrete recommendations to make us all better at peacemaking. It is with this message that I wish to send the Principles for Peace initiative off. Help us be better peacemakers. Help us make real progress towards a more peaceful world wherever it is possible. Thank you.
Those were the words of Ms. Christina Marti, the State Secretary and Head of Directorate for Political Affairs from the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs of Switzerland. We now move to the government of the Netherlands, who have been an avid supporter of inclusion and the UN Peace Building Architecture Review. Let's hear the message of Ms. Mariette Schumann, the Director of Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid at the Dutch MFA.
Over the past 3 decades, the nature of conflicts has changed. Conflicts are increasingly protracted and complex, reaching far deeper into societies and disrupting communities within and across borders. Combined with the impact of climate change and COVID-19, they have led to a staggering record of more than 80 million people displaced and 235 million people in need of life-saving assistance. In the face of this unprecedented human suffering, business as usual is not an option. We need a radical rethink of how we build and sustain peace and do better. We need a multidimensional, coherent, but most of all principled peace-building response, geared towards resilient communities and lasting, meaning just and inclusive peace. Because we've learned the hard way that there can be no peace without justice, and no peace without inclusion. Inclusion is key. Too often, peace processes take place at high-level tables with only the usual suspects involved, rewarding the minority that picked up arms. This doesn't lead to sustainable peace. Rather, we should aim for truly inclusive, locally owned and locally led peace processes, which address underlying grievances and provide for justice for survivors. Women and youth should participate meaningfully, not in the backseat, but at a main table, in their own right and with their own voices and aspirations, as leaders, not as victims. We need peace-building efforts to be close to people and communities, strengthening their resilience. A precondition for resilience and for effective peace-building is people's mental health and psychosocial well-being. This has been the main focus of the Netherlands' contribution to the 2020 UN Peacebuilding Architecture Review. The Netherlands fully supports the development of principles for peace through a collective and participatory process that gives prominence to the voices and perspectives of people whose lives have been shaped by conflict. We will support the commissioners in their work to ensure that the ensuing principles for peace are promoted and anchored in the international system to provide a new framework for inclusive peace processes and hence for resilient communities and sustainable, just and inclusive peace.
Those were the words of Ms. Mariette Schuurman, the Director of Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid at the Dutch MFA. The private sector and their foundations have also important role to contribute in this space. The Robert Bosch Foundation is one of the key supporters of the Principles for Peace initiative. I asked the Vice President, Ms. Atje Drexler, who's leading the International Understanding and Cooperation Unit at the Robert Bosch Foundation, about their perspectives and decision to support this initiative. Let's hear what she said.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Atje Drexler. I'm Senior Vice President for International Understanding and Cooperation at the Robert Bosch Stiftung in Germany. And we are very happy and proud to be part of the Principles for Peace initiative, as we believe it is very timely and much needed. We continue to see the repeated failure of peace process around the world, and we really need to rethink the way we are trying to transform conflicts into sustainable and lasting peace. I think the Principles for Peace initiative builds on the experience and knowledge of practitioners on the ground and of scientists alike, and all of them agree that peace processes must be much more inclusive and more locally owned and locally led to be successful and achieve lasting peace. However, this is missing very often in today's approaches to peace. And this is also exactly where this initiative intersects with our own strategy at the Robert Bosch Stiftung. We want to contribute to sustainable peace by supporting locally led peace initiatives, and at the same time by contributing to the global debate on peace building as such. And with that in mind, the Principles for Peace initiative is really the perfect match for us. And as I said before, we're really happy to be part of it. I think what this initiative makes this initiative stand out is the combination of local and global that it comprises in its approach. And this places the initiative at the perfect position to really develop guidelines for all of us that will transform the way we work, the way we think about peace building, and that will lead to more sustainable peace processes in the end. It also will lead to guidelines that really cater to the needs of affected communities, because the initiative will also amplify the voices of local actors. And with this inclusion of so many different perspectives and voices, I believe that these principles that we see at the end will also be broadly accepted. And that's not only a great achievement, but also a perfect starting point for their implementation.
Supporting and engaging in collective effort is not only limited to governments and organizations that you've heard from now. Of course, organizations that have worked and engaged in the peace-building sector for decades and has many lessons to share are integral to this effort, and we will be counting on them and engaging with them. From the Center for Humanitarian Dialogues to DCAF to Search for Common Grounds to International Alert, Inclusive Peace, Peace Direct, USIP, various networks like IPLO, AFP, WASL, and many other local and national organizations. We are reaching out. We will be joining efforts with them. And many of them are already engaging with us in supporting and preparing for the work with the International Commission through evidence generation, running country consultations, but also bringing their collective wisdom and network and their local organizations. So we very much count on that support. As Secretariat, as the head of Secretariat, but also as the international commissioners that I've heard and engaged with, all of them so far, we are fully committed to ensure that this initiative is truly a collective effort. And Scott, I know you share this vision with us as well, and as the Secretariat is hosted by Interpeace, what is your message and call to action to other organizations who have not yet joined us, and how can they support our effort?
Thank you, Hiba. Indeed, this is a collective effort. This is not just by Interpeace. We might be hosting the Secretariat and supporting you in your effort to support the International Commission, but we've been joined already by dozens of organizations across the space to join forces to develop these principles for peace. And what these organizations are committing to doing is reaching out into their own networks and their own constituencies in order to engage in the conversations that are needed to feed the Commission, this listening Commission, after all, with those voices, with those perspectives, but also to bring all the lessons that have been learned over the last 20, 30 years to the table so that we're not going to repeat some of the lessons that we already know. We can build on them and advance. Now, organizations that are not yet involved have an opportunity to join the stakeholder forum of this initiative and become part of the collective effort themselves. And there are various ways they can get involved, from mobilizing their own staff, from reaching out to the constituencies that they work with, but also just getting involved as individuals as well.
Thank you, Scott. I know I'm definitely counting on the support of all the organizations and partners so we could support the commissioners. And I know the commissioners are counting on the various organizations so we could come together. But we're also counting on the voices of those who we don't usually hear their voices. We're very much planning to pay extra attention to amplify voices of those whose lives have been shaped by conflict and really move beyond the usual suspects. So this is a pledge from us as an initiative and also on behalf of the Commission. So I would like to go back to the State Secretary again. With these commitments that you've heard from the member states, you've heard the commissioners speak, how can Sweden and other member states continue to engage and support the Commission and this effort?
Thank you, Hiba. And it was indeed a pleasure to hear such strong commitments from colleagues around the world on their support for this project and the work that we are about to conduct. The Commission, I think, it's evidently that they share such a strong commitment to move towards more lasting peace processes. And I think they bring extensive practical expertise and knowledge to lead this participatory effort forward. And I think also listening to the commissioners, it's clear that they bring in such a diversity of perspectives that I think is required to rethink and reshape current practices and charter new paths forward for a more sustainable peace. In terms of Sweden, we have for a long time championed multilateralism, and we will continue to do so. And thereby Sweden have repeatedly emphasized the need for increased international cooperation to prevent violent conflict, to build sustainable peace. And I think this is even more important now as part of our global pandemic response and everything that is aligned to that. And we need to work across sectors, across mandates, and by securing more and better financing for peace. I'm myself spearheading a process to develop what could be termed as good peace-building donorship as part of this effort. And I think Inclusion is a key component of conflict prevention and sustainable peace efforts. And inclusion is also about human rights. It's also about democracy. And I think Sweden's drive for democracy is a key focus area of the Swedish government that could also play a role in our efforts here. Now, Sweden supports, we engages in this initiative, and I would like to urge member states to consider supporting this initiative's objectives. And we hope that even more organizations will join and take part of the results of this collective effort. The initiative aims to build upon the important work of other institutions and organizations in the peace community, such as the UN Sustaining Peace Agenda and the World Bank fragility work. There's so many important efforts that is now taking place, and we have to join hands and really make this a collaborative work. And I think Scott outlined that very, very well, the importance of this. Now, through its strong partnerships with various international and intergovernmental organizations, Sweden will seek to support the establishment of principles for peace, which can hopefully contribute to guiding future peace processes. And we know that this world is in desperate need of working differently, of building back better, and finding ways towards a more sustainable and inclusive peace in so many corners of our earth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, State Secretary. And thank you very much, Scott, also for sharing your insights. Before we close the event, I would like to bring in 3 more messages from our commissioners. I asked Sanam Anderlini, the director of the Center for Women, Peace and Security at the London School of Economics, why she joined the Principles for Peace initiative. I also asked Ambassador Frederick Nguga, who's the head of Conflict Prevention and Early Warning Division at the African Union, to share with me his expectations as a member of the International Commission on Inclusive Peace. And I also discussed this with Annika Suder, who's the president of the Board of Governors at the European Institute of Peace and former State Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, what she believed Principles should achieve. Let's hear the 3 of them.
I'm excited about this initiative because I think it's time for those of us who have in a way been working in disparate or parallel universes around the same idea, around the idea that we need to reimagine and rethink how we do peacemaking, how we bring together different voices, and working in different sectors. I work with women, others work with youth or religious leaders and others. But this coming together and saying, let's combine all the knowledge and all the creativity and all the wisdom and all the resources and people that we have and think about it. So that's definitely one aspect of the commission that I value enormously. The second, frankly, is that we are 20 years into the 21st century, and the world needs a reimagined system and vision of how we deal with the challenges of this century. I don't believe in destroying what was created in the past. I believe in evolution and renovation rather than destruction. And so I think that this is about renewing and taking the best of what we've had in the multilateral system and in the global system, but also evolving it and bringing it into the 21st century to make it fit for purpose now. And I think that the initiative provides that opportunity for us to do that.
If you look across the world, we have been backsliding when it comes to the values and norms and principles that we all believe in. Intolerance has become normalized, and I think that we need to go back and really refocus again our action, promoting principles that we all believe in. And I think that this is what we're going to be doing. Putting our principles ahead. Leveraging our networks, strong advocacy, and really making sure that the voice of the voiceless is promoted by us.
We should also have people claiming peacefully their right to peace, and they should in turn get the support, moral, political, sometimes also economic support from the international community to start that building of their societies.
We hope that you could feel the commitment and the passion of the commissioners and all of our speakers, and that we have inspired you to join this initiative. There are many ways you can do so. If you are an individual who's directly affected by the failure of the current approaches to peace and the lack of accountability and lack of implementation of peace agreements, if you are an organization or a practitioner that has been working in this sector for a long time and feel a bit disillusioned with the way mistakes are repeated with little consequence, if you are a government or a UN official eager to ensure that your institution can contribute to making peace processes more effective in creating lasting peace, or if you're a young person or someone who feels that their voice should be heard, join us in this effort. I would also like to ensure that you hear the last message from one of our commissioners. Yves Dacour, who is the former Director General of the International Committee of the Red Cross, shared with us one message which I would like to leave you with. Let's hear him out.
This initiative will succeed. We have no choices. Success, and I know success is difficult, but success should be really in our reach. And we will be able to do that by bringing the people, by bringing the different stakeholders. And I really want to bring this energy and this hope that yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it together. And yes, it's possible to find solutions. It's possible to build on what has been done already. It's possible to find new ways, and it's possible to fight the cynicism around peace. Yes, peace is central to all of us, humankind, and it's the moment to be able to do that. So listening, bringing the voice to the table, including the voice that we never hear, and hope and energy about a positive result. That is my two commitment.
And this is the spirit of the Principles for Peace initiative, your collective effort. So thank you for tuning in, and check our websites, principlesforpeace.org, to stay updated and engage with us. There will be a collaborative space live very, very soon. The website is in final stages. You can already see it and engage with us, but you will have also your space where you can find all the documents, all the materials, share your ideas, share your thoughts, and share different input that you would like to provide directly to the International Commission. Thank you.